If you've ever known deep down that a relationship was not good for you and you stayed anyway, this is for you. Not because you're stupid, not because you're weak, but because you were taught something about love that made staying feel like the only option. Most people on the outside looking in can't understand it. They're probably thinking, why would someone stay with someone who hurts them? Why wouldn't they just leave? But if you grew up in a home where love was unpredictable, conditional, or came with pain attached, leaving doesn't feel simple. It feels like abandoning the only version of love that you have ever known, and that's exactly why you stay. Here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. When you grow up with a narcissistic parent, you learn something very specific about love. You learn that love is something you earn, that it requires you to be patient enough, understanding enough, forgiving enough, that if you just try harder, give more, become less, eventually it will be enough. And then you carry that belief into your romantic relationships. So when someone hurts you, your first instinct is not to leave, it's to try harder, to figure out what you did wrong, to become whatever version of yourself that might finally make them treat you the way that you deserve. Because leaving feels like failing, like giving up, like proving that you weren't enough after all. So, what does staying actually look like? Because it's not always obvious from the inside. Sometimes it looks like minimizing, telling yourself that it's not that bad, reminding yourself of the good times, comparing your relationship to worse ones so yours seems okay by comparison. Sometimes it looks like hoping, staying for who they could be instead of who they are, holding on to the relationship, holding on to the version of them from the beginning, believing that if you're just patient enough, they'll go back to being that person. Sometimes it looks like guilt, feeling responsible for their emotions, worrying about what will happen to them if you leave, putting their feelings above your own safety and well being because that's what you were taught that love requires. And sometimes it looks like fear, not just fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear that this is as good as it gets, fear that you don't deserve better or that better doesn't exist for someone like you. I know that last one intimately, that quiet belief that maybe this is just what love looks like for me, that I was asking too much for wanting to be with someone that didn't hurt, that I was asking for too much by wanting something that didn't hurt. That belief didn't come from nowhere. It was planted long before that relationship ever started. And this is the kind of pattern that is hard to recognize in the moment, which is exactly why I created something specifically to help. If you're someone who says yes when you mean no, who struggles to speak up and set their boundaries because they don't want to disappoint anyone, who overthinks every interaction and ends up blaming yourself when something goes wrong, the People Pleaser's Emotional Reset Guide was made just for you. It walks you through how to slow down, recognize what you're actually feeling, and come back to yourself instead of abandoning yourself the way that you've been taught to. It's completely free and the link is in the description. So, how do you actually start to leave, or at least start to see clearly enough to make a real choice? The first step is separating love from pain. If you grew up in an environment where love and pain came together, you might have unconsciously learned that pain is proof of love, that the intensity of the hurt means that the relationship matters. It doesn't. Pain is not passion. Chaos is not chemistry. You're allowed to want love that feels peaceful. The second step is getting honest about the pattern of behavior, not the exceptions. Because in the painful relationships, there are always good moments, always reasons to stay. The question isn't whether they can be good sometimes, it's whether the overall pattern of how they treat you is acceptable. Look at the pattern, not the peak moments. The third step is recognizing what staying is actually costing you. Not just emotionally, though that matters enormously, but who are you becoming in this relationship? Are you more of yourself or less of yourself? Are you expanding or are you shrinking? The relationship that is right for you will not require you to disappear inside it. The fourth step is building enough safety within yourself that leaving feels survivable. Because one of the biggest reasons people stay is that they don't trust themselves to be okay on the other side. And that's not weakness. That's what happens when you've spent years outsourcing your sense of safety to another person. You rebuild that same sense of safety slowly, one small act of trust at a time. That's all it takes. If you've ever been in a conversation where you try to express a need or set a boundary and you just go completely blank, you freeze, you can't find the words, and you end up apologizing instead of saying what you actually meant, that's called the freeze response, and it's one of the biggest barriers to breaking this pattern. I created the freeze recovery response kit specifically for that moment. Word for word scripts for when your mind goes blank in your relationships, with your family, with your friends, and even at work. So you never have to walk away from a conversation wishing you had said something again. The link is in the description. Before I go, I want to say something to anyone who is still in a relationship that is hurting them right now. You're not weak for staying. You're not foolish for loving someone who couldn't love you back properly. You are someone who was taught that this is what love requires, and you have been doing that the best you could with what you were given. But you're allowed to want more. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to choose yourself even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when you still love them. Leaving is not giving up on love. It's choosing to finally give that love to yourself. If this video resonated with you, the next one you should watch is about the signs that you're repeating your childhood patterns in love. Because understanding where these patterns come from is what makes it possible to finally break them. That video is linked right here. Subscribe for weekly videos on healing from toxic relationships and people-pleasing patterns. Comment below what has kept you in a relationship longer than you should have stayed. What kept you? I read every single comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.